So there's our smiling faces. I'm the Vice President of Outlook Business Solutions. Greg is our Accessibility Testing Manager. Greg actually works remotely. We're headquartered in Omaha. Greg works for us from his home in Kansas City. And we are part of Outlook Collaborative, which is a collection of companies focused on providing positive experiences for everyone who is blind or visually impaired. And so that is, those are our roots, is working with people who are blind or visually impaired for job opportunities, employment, and enrichment opportunities as well. So we're going to cover today what does accessibility mean, the market risk of not being accessible, the legal risk of not being accessible, how screen reader software works. We're going to cover some quick tips for better accessibility, and then how to add accessibility expertise to your development team. I'm watching the chat, so please post any questions as we go. And we're happy to also answer questions at the end. So Outlook Business Solutions, as I mentioned, is a business growth agency based in Omaha. We specialize in marketing, customer care, and digital accessibility. We have a network of more than 30 talented professionals, most of whom happen to be visually impaired. They come from all over the country and all facets of marketing and customer experience, from copywriters to graphic designers to customer care professionals, data entry folks. So really kind of run the gamut on our skill sets. So what is digital accessibility? Digital accessibility means all users have access to the same information, regardless of any disability they may have or the technology they may use to access that information. And the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has actually stated that it's a basic human right to have access to information and communication technology, including the web. So this is a global issue when it comes to digital accessibility. So what kind of information formats need to be accessible? Basically, all of them. Forms, pictures, graphs, guides and manuals, training, videos, documents, charts, meetings, web pages, podcasts, infographics. If it is information and it's being conveyed in a digital environment, it needs to be accessible. So one of the things that's really interesting about digital accessibility is that unlike gender, race, or sexual orientation, which are minority groups and DEI initiatives that we hear a lot about, disability is the only minority group that any one of us could end up joining at any time. So not to wish ill on anybody, but you could be in a car accident tonight and find yourself disabled tomorrow, which is not true of a lot of the other areas we talk about with diversity, equity, and inclusion. So disability really is an important conversation. Most people believe that the majority of people with disabilities were born that way. Actually, only 15% of the disabled population of 43 million Americans was born with their disability. The other 85% acquire that disability at some other point in their life. The top 3 causes of disability in the US are arthritis, back and spine injuries, and then heart conditions. And 1 in 4 of today's 20-year-olds will become disabled before they reach retirement age. So when you think about that, it's a really important market for a business to be able to continue to reach people even if they acquire a disability. I want to talk a little bit about disability and employment. The unemployment rate for people with disabilities in the US is a staggering 69%, compared to 32% for people without disabilities. And part of the problem is that employment opportunities for people with disabilities can be limited because when they get into the work environment, they can't access the basic workplace tools to perform their job duties. So as knowledge-based workers, think about the things you use every day, technology-wise, to do your job. You're probably using Microsoft Office Suite for part of your job. You're probably accessing websites for information. Maybe you have proprietary systems within your company for accounting or for client relationship management. When those things aren't accessible to people with disabilities, it can really limit their opportunities for employment. And really, the cost for employers to accommodate a disabled employee is nominal. So they did a survey of companies, and 56% of accommodations companies made cost nothing. 39% of accommodations were just a one-time cost. So the company had to make a one-time adjustment to something for the employee, and that was it. There was no ongoing cost. And of those companies that did do a one-time cost for an accommodation, the average cost was just $500. So it really does not cost a lot of money for companies to make accommodations for disabled employees. And companies benefit when they make accommodations, when they include more people with disabilities in their employment base. So it may allow a company to retain a valued employee who has suffered a disability. We have contact with many professionals who had prospering careers, and their career was derailed or sidetracked or put on hold because they ended up with a disability. It can increase employee productivity, and it can also eliminate the cost of training a new employee. So if an employee becomes disabled and can no longer do their job, you will have to train a new employee to do that job. So you avoid that risk. The indirect benefit of making accommodations is that it improves interactions with coworkers for that disabled employee. It increases the overall company morale. So everybody feels good when they see the company doing good by a disabled employee, and it can increase the overall company productivity. Unfortunately, disability is the missing piece in the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation. The UN did a study of articles discussing diversity, and only 3% of those articles mentioned disability as part of the DEI conversation. And that has only increased 1% in the past 5 years. So, in the past year, we've seen a lot of movement. We've seen a lot of the country focusing on racial inequity, sexual orientation inequities in the treatment of the LGBTQ community. But we're not talking very much about the inequalities for people with disabilities. So why should a company care, besides it being the right thing to do? Actually, focusing on making things accessible for people with disabilities can help a company increase its market share. Unfortunately, 98% of websites have detectable accessibility failures, which basically says to a person with disabilities, you're not welcome here. That the company is not open for business if you have a disability. But it's a big market. 16% of working age Americans have a disability, and the discretionary income for that market is $21 billion. And discretionary income is the amount of money you have left to spend after you pay for taxes and your living expenses. So that's your fun money. That's your money you can invest or you can spend in ways that aren't, the rent and the food and those kind of things. So it's a pretty big market to be excluding. And it's going to get bigger. Baby boomers are moving into retirement. They're in their 50s and 60s, and they're actually in poorer health than earlier generations at the same age. There is more chronic disease and disability among the boomer population than their predecessors. So despite that, the boomer population remains the nation's biggest spenders overall. And we see the highest spending in the 55 to 59 segment. So when we are talking about targeting the boomer market, we really have to talk about accessibility, because they are more likely to become disabled or to have a disability, but they're still spending money. The online revenue that is lost for businesses because of inaccessibility is about I can't see my notes on my slide, 15.5 trillion, I believe. Don't quote me on that one, but you can quote me on this one. 70% of online shoppers would rather just leave a website and try to navigate through accessibility barriers, which is what you heard Greg doing as we got on the session just now, or call customer service for help. So that's a big misperception, is that a person with disabilities, if they can't access the site, will reach out to customer service. Most of them will not. So they will leave the site and you'll never know that the issue was inaccessibility. So the implications for businesses: most businesses are not taking advantage of the $500 billion in market value of the disabled population. Again, as I mentioned with the boomers, we have growing numbers and greater inclusion of people with disabilities. And when you factor in the friends and family members and caregivers and colleagues of people with disabilities, you have an even greater market that is focused on accessibility, aware of accessibility, and expecting companies to be accessible. So we're going to talk about legal risk, and that accessibility for business is a great segue into one of the most important accessibility legal cases in the last few years. And it was about something as simple as ordering pizza. In 2016, a blind gentleman was trying to use a screen reader application to use the Domino's Pizza website or app. I think he tried both, to order pizza. And neither of those technologies was accessible. So he couldn't do it through the website. He couldn't do it through the Domino's Pizza app. So he called and he called his order in, right? So one of those people that actually did call instead of just leaving the site. He was told that he could not use the coupons from the app or the website because those were only available to customers that were ordering through those methods. So he sued Domino's Pizza under the Americans with Disabilities Act for inaccessibility. And Domino's actually fought back instead of doing the right thing. And Domino's actually fought all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And in October of 2019, the US Supreme Court refused to hear Domino's appeal. And so kicked it back down to the circuit court level. And believe it or not, Domino's is still fighting this in court. Here's what it's costing them. There are estimates that to fix the website and the app to make them accessible for people with disabilities would have cost Domino's about $32,000. I've seen estimates as high as $40,000. What they've spent in legal fees so far, and this was probably through the end of last year, was estimated at $6 million. That, I'm not good at math, but that's something like an 18 times. Cost 18 times more to fight this in court than to simply make the site and the app accessible. The number of cases, digital accessibility cases under the ADA is growing. In 2020, we had a 23% increase over 2019. Not surprisingly, 2019, a lot of things were kind of on hold until the Supreme Court decided whether it would hear the Domino's case. But we're now up to an average of 10 digital accessibility lawsuits every business day. And that's only going to increase. Those numbers only include federal court cases and cases filed in California under their UNRU Act, which is very similar to the ADA. It does not include cases filed at the state level in any other state that has accessibility laws. So the Americans with Disabilities Act turned 30 last year. And the question becomes, if we're not accessible now, when are we going to make this a priority? So lawsuits are going to increase. Market share, the market for services for people with disabilities, regardless of what you sell, is increasing. And companies are still neglecting accessibility. So one of the another misperception about assistive technology is that it's just for people with disabilities. And that's not quite true. So some of you, this being a tech conference, there's probably some familiarity in the audience with universal design. And universal design simply means that an environment a digital environment or a physical environment, can be accessed or understood and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, their size, their ability, or their disability. So it's a fundamental condition of good design. And when you make websites, when you make an environment accessible, you make it better for everybody. So we're going to use an example here of speech command and recognition. So I don't know, I won't ask the QA, but I'll just give you the answer. Speech recognition has actually been around since 1987 when Dragon launched Naturally Speaking. And Siri didn't launch until 14 years later in 2011. In 2012, Google launched voice search as a novelty feature. And then in 2014, Amazon launched Alexa and Echo. So the appetite for speech command and voice and speech recognition has really increased. So who needs this, right? Google launched it as a novelty. Who really needs it? So here we have an image of a woman who is an amputee and has partial arm on her right side and is able to do some things like pick up a fork with a nice chunk of watermelon there. But she cannot type on a keyboard. She may be unable to use a mouse. So for her, voice command is a really intrinsic part of how she's going to access information. We also have people with a temporary disability. So we have a photo of a woman who's broken her arm. And a person may suffer an injury, a car accident. They may have a disease like arthritis that is flaring up or becoming worse and makes it difficult for them to use a keyboard or a mouse. So again, speech command and speech recognition provide a really viable and helpful alternative for her. And then we talk about a situational inability. We have this beautiful picture of a dad holding his baby girl. But imagine if the baby had been injured in some way or had swallowed something, and the father is holding the baby and trying to contact emergency services or poison control or call a neighbor or somebody for help, and he can't use his hands to use his phone because he's holding the baby. So we see that universal design and using things, having things like speech command really makes everything better for everybody, even if you're not disabled. So we're going to attempt to launch a screen reader demo here with Greg. I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to give Greg a few minutes to set up his screen share, and hopefully you will be able to hear the audio from his screen reader. So Greg, I'm done sharing.
Okay, sounds good.
So while we give Greg a few minutes to do that, if there are any questions, if you want to type those in the chat and we can address those. Emily, thank you for the comment, informative. It is definitely eye-opening to be in an organization that serves people with visual impairment. And just for background for the rest of the audience, I myself am not disabled, but I do have a 25-year-old son who has multiple disabilities, intellectual, developmental, and physical. So disability was part of my world before I ever joined Outlet. So Greg, we're seeing your screen.
All right, very good. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
That's good. Let's see if we can get the third step down. Can people hear this audio? It's sort of a little bit of a robotic speech.
Greg, it's very faint.
Oh man,
Okay.
It doesn't appear as if it's going to work. I have tried to check the audio box to share. I wish that we could get the audio working. I apologize, everyone.
That's okay. Greg, I'll run the video. So Greg and I did plan in advance. And so we have a plan B. Greg pre-recorded a demonstration. So I'm going to play that audio or play the video for you where you'll be able to hear the screen reader software as it reads as it tells Greg what's on the screen. So give me just a second to share again.
And again, while Natalie is sharing, feel free to speak up with any questions.
Yep. All right, let's give this a shot and see if I can get the video to work.
Hi everyone, my name is Gregor.
Oh, you guys aren't seeing it, are you?
Testing manager for Outlook Business
It's running in it opened in
And
another
I
window
just
on
wanted
me. All right, hold on. Give me just a second. Plan B. Here we go. There.
Give you a demo of some inaccessible as well as accessible website experiences for today's demonstration.
Hey, Natalie, I think when you shared it, the sound was playing through your microphone. And so when you muted yourself, the sound has stopped playing. Is there a way you can reshare? Is this in a tab? Oh, there we go.
For someone like me that uses the screen reading technology. For this demonstration, I will be using NVDA, which is a free and open source screen reader for Windows. That can be installed to any computer, can be tested on any device. So we've got a limited time frame, so let me just share my screen and then we'll start talking about graphics. Just a minute, please. And for this demonstration, you'll actually be able to not only hopefully see everything as I see it, but you'll be able to hear the actual sound output of the screen reading technologies. So without further ado, let's get the show on the road. Welcome. So now we're going to start out initially with some inaccessible graphics, and I'm just going to go through these really quickly and then give you a brief explanation of what's wrong and how they can be fixed.
Web accessibility initiative. Red dot with a white letter C that symbolizes a moon crescent as well as the sun. This logo is followed by a black banner that says Citylights, which.
So some of these have descriptions that are way too long and they don't tell me anything, like that particular description. I stopped it because it kept going, and I want to respect everyone's time, but let's just go through some of these others and you'll see what's wrong with these.
To get missing image descriptions, open the context menu. Unlabeled graphic.
No description there.
NAV home unlabeled graphic link. NAV news unlabeled graphic. NAV fax unlabeled graphic link.
Those three have HTML code that doesn't need to be there that can confuse the reader.
NAV survey unlabeled graphic link.
So does that one.
Bullet graphic. Bullet graphic.
So we can see those graphics don't work particularly well for someone like me. They don't convey information on the screen. Now let's go to some graphics that do work, that are accessible. You'll see that these have succinct descriptions, but they tell me the purpose of what the image is supposed to be, and they add meaning to the page. Let's just do that real quick.
Welcome to City Lights. W3C logo graphic link W3C home.
That's telling me that that's a logo. That's good.
Web accessibility initiative. Way. Logo graphic link way home. City lights. Your access to the city. Graphic. Sunny spells graphic. Three penguins playing on stage graphic.
So all of these, as you might be able to see, have pretty meaningful descriptions on these pages.
Anemone snowdrop flower blooming graphic.
And it's a flower.
No next graphic.
That's the end of our page on graphics. So, as a screen reader user, something that's really important to me is the heading structure. So, if headings are marked up on a page at specific heading levels, I can actually use the numbers on the keypad to read by heading. And headings can really give me a general idea of the structure of the page and the sections when implemented correctly. We're going to see we're going to first go through some headings for a page that doesn't really have any headings, and we'll see what happens. And you'll see, I'll use my backup plan, which is navigating to the next block of text. You'll actually start to see that because of the way that it's coded, it will actually miss some text that might be meaningful to the page. Start out with headings on the inaccessible page.
Welcome to visit inaccessible homepage. No next heading. Improving a website using Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.0.
So there's a lot of stuff here, and I'm not going to be able to easily access it because
No next heading.
there's no more headings on the page. So I'm going to start using my backup plan, which is the next block of text command using a screen reader. We're going to see what happens. We do this.
List with 6 items. Current location home. Link overview. App list with current location home. To get missing image descriptions, open the context menu.
There's one of our good old inaccessible graphics.
Visited link. This unlabeled graphic to blank.
And now we noticed when we went to the next block of text, there's a blank line, so I've got to scroll up to read to see if there's any text here, and I think there is.
Link unlabeled blank. Link blank. Link unlabeled link blank. Link unlabeled graph blank.
Not there.
Image. Link lack of brain. Link mandate. Link heatwave. The latest news. City Lights is welcome to City Lights.
So we start to see I had to scroll up to get to the beginning of this block of to the welcome section because that next block of text command actually missed it because of the way that it was coded.
City Lights is the new portal for visitors and residents. The latest news.
Let's go. Let's do this again and see what happens.
Image. Link lack of link lack of brain. Image. Mayor, these kinds of crimes need more creative.
So we noticed that it started reading at mayor, but when we go up, we'll discover.
Link was hot. After 3 years of effort, city scientists now agree that the primary cause of the 2003 heat wave was hot air from our Link news.
So we can see that I had to actually go back up to read that. The only way for me to be able to access this particular page is going line by line, which I don't think anyone wants to do. Conversely, let's go to a much better reading experience. While there are certainly ways to even improve upon this next one that I'm going to show you, you'll see that it reads much, much better. Let's do that now.
Welcome to City Lights. Accessible. No next heading at level 1. Visited link skip. Accessible homepage before and after demonstration heading level 1.
So this is great because it's got heading 1.
Welcome to City Lights heading level 1.
And the best part about this is it actually has a heading 1 that starts the page that tells me what the page is. Welcome to City Lights. Let's just start reading through this.
City Lights is the new portal for visitors and residents. The latest news. City Lights is the new portal for visitors and residents. Find out what's on. Book the latest. Heading level 2 link man gets 9 months in violin case.
So one nice thing is then they start using heading level 2s to be able to separate each story. So I can start using a number 2.
Lack of brains hinders research link heading level 2. Elsewhere on the web heading level 2. City Lights concert heading level 2.
And another thing that I can use that's valuable here that most screen readers know is just navigating my headings themselves, which is just H and Shift plus H.
Elsewhere on the web heading level 2. Lack of brains hinders research link heading level 2. Elsewhere on the web heading level 2. City Lights concert heading level 2. Graphic Free Penguins playing on stage. Free Penguins slogan at zoo benefit concert causes confusion among city rockers. Adjective or verb. Visited link buy tickets.
So we can see that this is pretty well labeled. The text is easily distinguishable because good headings separate these.
Heading level 2 City Lights survey. Graphic anemone snowdrop flower blooming.
So now that's just a little bit on both graphics and reading experiences. The reading experiences are are really important because that's how people are going to initially be able to see what your page is for. They have to be able to read the information easily in order to be able to access your website. So now that I've read your page and I want to do some interaction, I want to fill out this survey for you because you need the information. But as you'll see in this first example, the forms are not marked up correctly. You'll see that in a lot of cases they're either unlabeled or they're not associated with their appropriate form fields. So let's try to take this survey and you'll gain a better understanding of how this works.
Welcome to City Lights.
See an accessible survey page? Let's just go through this. Because I have a little bit of practice, I know that this form is actually in a table. It's in a layout table, which is really peculiar. I would just have this form start out with a heading. But since I know this form's in a table, let's start trying to fill this out. One thing to know before I start is, ideally, I'd like to be able to tab through the entire form and interact with it with the arrow keys, or in appropriate cases, just typing my information using the edit boxes. We'll see what happens when I try to tab through it first.
Table with 3 rows and 4 columns. Row 1, column 1 through 4. Which is your favorite city park? Which is your favorite city park? Which is your table? Red dot with a white letter C that symbolizes a moon. Table. Row 1, column 1. Table row 1. Row 1. Table. Row 1, column 1. Table row 1. Row 1, column 2. Table row 1. Name, Mr. MRS. Email address, retype email. Row 3, do you want to receive a free newsletter? Column 1. Table.
So we can see the tab order. It's just not really going through this particularly well. I'm going to try to shift tab and go back, see what happens.
Table. Row 1, column 1. Table row 1. Row 1, column 2. Table row 1. Select a city greater. Row 3, which city do you find is the greenest? Column 1. Combo box, select a city greater. Collapse. Row 3. Table. Row 1, column 1. Table row 1. Row 1, column 2. Table row 1. Row 3, column 3. Table row 3. Row 3, column 1. Radio button not checked. Row 3, 1 of 1. Row 3, column 1. Row 2. Radio button checked. Row 2, 1 of 1. Row 3. Radio button checked. Row 3, 1 of 1.
So we've determined now that I'm not going to be able to use my preferred method of navigating this particular form. So I have a backup plan. That takes probably 2 to 4 times as long, but let's go through this real quick.
Out of table link. Combo box collapsed. Table with 3 rows blank. Radio button notch. Radio button. Which is your favorite city park? Which is your favorite? Row 3, column 1. Radio button not checked. Blank. Radio button not checked. Blank. Radio button checked. Blank. Column 2 none. Blank. Central Park. Blank. Grand Park. Blank. Column 3. Radio button not checked. Blank. Radio button not checked. Blank. Radio button not checked. Blank. Column 4. Jurassic Park. Blank. South Park. Blank. Other.
So the problem with this one is clearly the forms aren't, the labels aren't associated with the radio buttons, the selection radio buttons. So I'd have to try to memorize all 6 of those in order to select the right one. That's really hard.
Blank. Out of table blank. Table with 3 row 2, which city do you find is the greenest? Row 3, combo box collapsed. Select a city greater. Out of table blank. Table with 3 rows and 2 columns. Row 1, do you want to receive a free newsletter? Column 1 through 2.
So what's the problem with this one? Well, I would expect, based on their phrasing, that it's a yes or no question. And in fact, they have radio boxes. That would make me think that. But let's see what happens when I try to access
Row
it.
2, do you want to receive a free newsletter? Row 3, do you want to receive a free newsletter? Column 1 name. Radio button not checked MR. Radio button not checked MRS. Table. Edit row 1 blank.
Now when we tab,
Column 3. Edit has autocomplete. Row 1 blank.
you can see the form fields just aren't labeled.
Name. Blank. Edit. Radio button not checked. Blank. Edit. Blank. Edit submenu has autocomplete. Blank. Blank. Edit.
This one's so bad. You don't see this as often, but this one's so bad that even using arrow keys, I'm not able to understand what this form is for.
Email address. Blank. Retype email. Out of table button submit.
So clearly, I wouldn't be ready to take this survey. Conversely, let's do an accessible survey. with forms that have appropriate labels and associations. We'll see how easy this is.
City Lights Survey. Link.
So I know that the form.
Accessible survey page before and after demo. City Lights Survey heading level 1.
This is really nice because I'm able to see clearly it's just a page right here. And tables in and of themselves aren't bad, but what they should be used for is simply to, as data tables, to convey relationships between types of information and not necessarily layout tables. For this case, the way they've got this particular form in a much more linear fashion makes a lot more sense. Now I'm going to use my preferred way of filling out this form, and you'll see what happens.
Favorite park grouping. None radio button not checked 1 of 1.
So this one's really nice because I've tapped into it. Now it's time for interaction and making a selection. So I'm just gonna use the arrow keys.
Central Park radio button checked. Grand Park radio button checked 1 of 1.
I'm just gonna select that one. That one's works well for me.
Greenest city grouping. Cities of the world combo box. Select a city from this list collapsed.
This combo box is, in my opinion, the best way that you could implement a combo box. What's really nice about this one is I can open it using interactive elements, so I can just push down arrow.
Abu Dhabi, Abuja, Accra, Ghana.
And go through all of these. But if I know the one I want, I can also use first letter navigation with the screen reader, because of the way it's coded. And
W, Warsaw, Washington D.C. United States.
I want to select Washington, D.C. Now let's tab through this.
W, free newsletter, optional, grouping, MR. Radio button not checked, title 1 of 2.
This one clearly says that it's optional, so that means I don't necessarily have to fill it out. I want to take you back to this combo box real quick, and you'll see something else that's really nice about it. It will have actually saved my information without having to make any additional effort aside from choosing the box. Let's see what happens when I go shift tab real quick.
Greenest city grouping. Cities of the world combo box. Washington D.C. United States collapsed.
And there it is. It saved it, and it allowed me to just keep going with the form.
Free newsletter, optional, grouping, MR. Radio button not checked, title 1 of 2.
I'm a male, so I'll just
Space,
select
checked.
this. And there it is. It's checked.
Name, edit has autocomplete blank.
I'll just type in a name here.
B-R-E-T, Brett, P-A-I-L-I-P-S, Phillips, retype email, edit has autocomplete blank.
And I will just use the down arrow to select my email here.
Autofill list expanded. Grogers at test@outlookbiz.ak@yahoo.com. Grogers at outlookbiz.co. Please delete JAWS test ak@yahoo. Grogers at outlookbiz.co. Please delete and manage. 5 of 5.
And I've got all my options there. All I have to do is enter that, which is really nice.
Settings Google Chrome. Settings Chrome.
I don't need Google Chrome settings, but needless to say, that's a much better form. I definitely could fill out that survey much easier. So this concludes our brief demo for today. Just a demo on graphics, reading experiences, and interaction of your website using forms. Thank you guys for attending our presentation today, and I'd like to throw it back to Natalie. Thanks, everyone.
Meeting.
All right. Thanks, Greg. We made that work. So you can see sometimes you have to get a little creative on the workarounds when you're dealing with assistive technology. So just to kind of recap some of the things Greg went through and add a couple more best practices for you. You really want your site to be compatible with screen reader, voice command, and magnification software. We didn't do anything on magnification today, but there are specific guidelines for how to make a web page more accessible for someone who is using magnification. Make sure your images are labeled with alt text and that the alt text is meaningful. So the alt text needs to describe the image in a way that fits the context. Form input fields labeled in the right location. I put something in the chat about that. It's a lot easier if whether it's a radio button or whether it's a fillable field, that you put those labels before the field rather than after or below the field. Videos, we didn't touch on this, but videos need to have closed captioning or a transcript or both for people who are hearing impaired. Greg gave you a great demonstration of why headers need to be labeled and used correctly. And I put a tip in the chat. They're not just for formatting and making a page pretty. Those have headers, header 1, header 2, those styles really do make a difference in the navigation experience. You want to make sure you're using high color contrast for low vision users. Gray text has been very trendy on websites for a long time. It's incredibly hard for people with low vision to read. And then make sure your buttons and links are labeled correctly. Greg didn't do a long demonstration of this, but you got a taste of it, that if you have a page that's where you have made all the link labels consistent and they all say learn more or more information, or worse yet, click here. If Greg is using this setting in Screen Reader that allows him to basically skim the page by just reading the links, all he's going to hear is read more, read more, read more. So those links need to have the context so that when just the link label is read, the person using Screen Reader can navigate appropriately. So again, accessibility is the outcome and inclusive design is the process. So if you're not including people with disabilities in the process, you can't really call it inclusive design. Just a quick pitch here at the end of our time. Outlook Business Solutions has a subscription program called Ally Support. I love our tagline, we know accessibility A to Y and everything in between. So if you're familiar with the hashtag A11Y, it is actually pronounced A11Y and not ally. And the meaning behind it is there are 11 characters in the word accessibility between the A and the Y. So that's where that comes from. But our Ally Support program lets you add digital accessibility expertise to your development team without adding full-time staff who are certified in accessibility. Just quick overview of some of the subscription benefits. It lets you outsource your periodic digital accessibility testing needs. We help educate your internal team on how to spot and remove accessibility issues. And we also help you learn how to build accessibility into your development process from the earliest stages, rather than letting the whole project get to the very end and you do an accessibility audit as your final QA and finding that there were issues that could have been addressed way earlier. And now you've got to do a bunch of rework or delay your launch. So in summary, accessibility makes your market bigger. Accessibility makes your legal risk smaller. And Outlook Business Solutions makes accessibility easier with our Ally Support program. So we thank you for your time today. We'll open it up for questions. And feel free to visit our virtual booth. I'll be there after we're done here for the rest of the day to take your questions or to chat with you about anything, any questions you have about accessibility. Angel, you're welcome for the tips. It's been such a learning curve for me to come in and learn about accessibility and to be working with Greg. So I learn something new every time. Thanks, Tony. Happy to be providing some information on accessibility and to be partnering with AIM. We'll have an ongoing relationship with the AIM Institute to assist them in making sure that everything AIM provides is accessible to those with disabilities. So excited for that partnership. Emily, thank you for being there and trying to help us troubleshoot on the audio. You know, we encountered this a lot, so it wasn't a surprise. So we did have our plan B ready to go. So thank you for your help. going to actually click out of this, and I've got a few more tips in the actual deck than what we showed. If anybody's curious about how to actually do some of these things when you're building the website, just gonna, we do have a webinar coming up June 16th. Greg will be doing a deeper dive into accessibility specifically for developers and helping you understand a little bit of coding. Greg's not a coder, he will tell you that, but understand a little bit more on the coding side and the development side, best practices for accessibility. And you can find that on the Outlook website and register there. Heather, the name of the screen reader that Greg uses, Greg, you want to unmute and talk about that a little bit? I think you were using NVDA today.
Sure. There are a couple different screen readers that I use. The one that I used in the demonstration is called Non-Visual Desktop Access, or NVDA for short. And they are created by a nonprofit out of Australia called NV Access, and it's an open source screen reader based on the Python language, and anyone can download it and install it to their Windows machine at no charge. And it's keeping up with a lot of the commercial screen reading stuff as well. So that I would recommend. That's a really good screen reader to do a lot of your testing with, or have us do it with. There's also commercial screen readers. The other one is called JAWS, and that you do have to have a little bit more of a financial commitment to that, but I can test using either one of those.
Tony asked the question in the chat for the lawsuit, the Domino's lawsuit. Why do you think the company continues to fight it? There is a school of thought that the ADA as written does not apply to virtual environments, that it was written specifically for brick and mortar business locations. That contingent wants to see Congress amend the ADA, and they want Congress in that amendment to provide very specific guidance on what is required. The other school of thought is that the internet didn't even exist 30 years ago when the ADA was written, and the way it is written is broad enough to encompass virtual environments. And that specific guidance is already provided by the WCAG guidelines. So that's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines written by the World Wide Web Consortium. Rather than codifying the WCAG into the ADA, because the WCAG is constantly going through updates, we're waiting for an update that's going to be coming out sometime, I think, this summer. It's much more practical for the ADA to simply reference the WCAG guidelines if that kind of amendment is needed, rather than Congress coming up with its own version of accessibility guidelines. So that's why the legal battle is ongoing. The circuit courts are split right now. There was a ruling on a Winn-Dixie case the other day that went toward the Domino's side of that the ADA does not address virtual environments. So that will probably be appealed and be the next one we really watch in this space. But again, as we showed, the cost to make a site or app accessible is much, much lower than the cost of litigation. And that doesn't even factor in the cost, the reputational cost to a business. I don't think you could find a blind person that's willing to patronize Domino's. You're welcome, Tony. Any other questions? Looks like we still have a few folks in the room. We'll stay on here for another couple of minutes till noon, and then I'll probably leave this session and pop into our booth so you can come over and visit us there. Greg Heather says, thank you for the great demo.
Oh, no problem. It's just a daily experience. So fortunately, I can provide demos like that at any time.
Yep. We are happy to schedule demos with your team, or as I said, Greg will be doing a 1-hour webinar specifically for developers. That's on June 16th. If you go to the outlookbiz.co website, not .com, .co website, and under the About Us, go to events, you can register for that workshop there. And then we also provide basically this same workshop periodically. Just accessibility basics for businesses is kind of what we call this one. So we don't get into as much of the specific coding and the elements kind of on the back side of things. I feel like I need to keep talking. It's weird to be talking and then your responses come through chat and I can't see anybody's face. So I don't know, I can tell you a little bit more about Outlook Business Solutions in the next couple of minutes. As mentioned, we are a business growth agency, and we've been around formally since June of 2019. So we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary. And besides our accessibility services, we also provide marketing strategy and tactical support. So we have a great pool of very talented writers, graphic designers. We are a HubSpot partner, so we provide basic HubSpot setup and kind of data management, CRM, and sales enablement for companies. So we're working with a company right now on a phone campaign where we're utilizing HubSpot. And really what we're all about is creating those earning opportunities for knowledge-based workers who are blind or visually impaired. So we are constantly coming across talents and skill sets in the visually impaired community that we didn't know we needed. And so I'm kind of the matchmaker. We look for businesses that have needs, and then I go find talented professionals who happen to be blind or visually impaired to fulfill those needs. So I never say no if somebody says, can you do X? It's like, maybe. We had a client that we needed some help with their internal culture. And it just so happened that somebody who had come to us as a writer, and he's visually impaired, he lives down in Columbia, Missouri, has a background in organizational dysfunction. And so we were able to bring him in as a co-consultant on that project with a local accounting firm. So we're always, we love to meet professionals with all kinds of skill sets who are in the disabled community. So. All right, well, we haven't had any questions in a few minutes, so I think we'll go ahead and pop off. Thank you, everybody, for attending our session. We hope that you found value. The session was recorded, so I think AIM is going to make these available afterwards. And again, head over to our booth, and I'm happy to continue the conversation there. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.